Last year, JSW MG Motor launched a new electric vehicle. It was a crossover SUV called the Windsor. At first glance, it looked like pretty much any MG SUV. Nothing out of the ordinary. And yet, most news publications back then were touting this launch as revolutionary. Turns out, they were right. Because today, about 6 months later, Windsor has become one of the best selling electric cars in India. It recently even managed to outperform Tata's most popular offerings like Nexon and Punch EV. The obvious question here is, what did MG do differently? And the answer is simple. By doing for EVs what Reliance did for cell phones back in early 2000s. Allow me to explain. Picture this. It is December 2002. Mobile phones have entered the market, but the average Indian is still pretty skeptical. Cell phone connections are patchy and, more importantly, expensive. And devices themselves were unwieldy, limited, and again, expensive. Now, if you're under the age of 25, this may come as a shock to you, so brace yourselves. But basic services like sending a text or a voicemail or call waiting, when you call somebody and it's busy, all of these things were considered add on services and they needed to be purchased separately. So most people thought it wasn't worth the investment. They were okay with the good old fashioned landline telephones at home. It is not that people thought this was some kind of a fad. By then, it was clear that it was the future. And then Reliance came in and changed everything. Back then, Mukesh Ambani launched Infocom. The idea was to make telephone calls in India as cheap as sending a postcard. And as we all know, it worked. Slowly, as costs started to drop, more and more people saw sense in adopting mobile phones and eventually abandoning landlines altogether. And life was never the same again. It's crazy that the same company, Reliance, managed to disrupt mobile telephony all over India again with Jio. But it was Reliance Infocom's CDMA phone back in the day where original mobile revolution actually began. The first time around, though, Reliance managed to pull this off in three simple ways: offer a competitive product at a low entry price, make future costs predictable based on usage, and throw in a bunch of other stuff for free. Now, you are probably wondering, why are we talking about mobile phone adoption so much? This episode is by no means a history lesson, but that context was very important, and you will know soon enough. Because India is almost exactly where it was back then, except the device they are on the fence about now, instead of mobile phones, is electric vehicles. Funnily enough, the solutions that some of the players are coming up with are eerily similar to the Reliance strategy back then. Welcome to Daybreak, a business podcast from the Ken. I'm your host Snigdha Sharma, and I don't chase the news cycle. Instead, every day of the week, my colleague Rahil Philippos and I will come to you with one business story that is worth understanding and worth your time. Today is Thursday, the 6th of March. Why did Windsor succeed? I'm going to explain it in just a moment, but before that, I have an exciting announcement to make. This episode of Daybreak is based on an issue of our very popular newsletter called The Nut Graph, written by my colleague, the Ken COO, Praveen Gopal Krishnan. You can now listen to the latest edition of Nut Graph every single Saturday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the Ken app. We will add all the links to the show notes of this episode. And with that out of the way, let us get into the Windsor success story. Well, it wasn't so much about the car. Instead, it was about the aggressive pricing model that the company had put in place for it. It's called the Battery as a Service or BaaS pricing model. So customers could just purchase a car at an introductory price of just under 10 lakh rupees, but they would then be able to pay a battery usage fee of rupees 3.5 per kilometer. It was like a subscription plan for your EV battery. And then there were the bells and the whistles, like an assured buyback plan, a lifetime battery warranty. It was like a never seen before deal. Of course, the price of the car has gone up since then, but the bold strategy indicated one thing, and one thing only: MG is not playing around. They had every intention to completely disrupt the electric car market here in India. In fact, Parth Jindal, the director of JSW MG Motor in India, said as much in an interview around the launch.
So this is the product that we think can truly take the EV penetration in India to the next level. We are actually not really that focused on just the EV segment. We want this product to compete with ICE head on. We want to cannibalize and take market share away from ICE.
He pointed out how most car sales in India happen in the below 10 lakh rupees segment. So the only way to disrupt the market was to enter that segment, which is why they decided to play in the 9 to 11 lakh rupees segment. They recognized that that was the sweet spot from a pricing perspective. JSW also did not just stop at pricing. It also went ahead and announced a lifetime battery warranty to Windsor buyers. Plus, the buyback scheme at 60% of the car's value definitely did not hurt. It also threw in free vehicle maintenance warranty, free roadside assistance, and scheduled servicing for 3 years. It was a gift that kept on giving. Okay, so now let us take a moment and break down all of this. To get more people to buy EVs, specifically MG EVs, JSW did three things. One, it created a competitive product at a low entry price. Two, it made future costs predictable. And three, it threw in a bunch of attractive add ons. You see where I'm going here? Because it sounds a lot like what Reliance did with Infocom back in the 2000s. So, where does MG go from here now? Stay tuned to find out. One way to assess whether JSW's strategy with Windsor will work is to ask whether electric vehicles or EVs today are where mobile phones were in the early 2000s, which is also how I started this episode. Like I said earlier, in some ways it is true. EVs are the future, and yet, like with mobile phones, adoption has been slow. Last year was particularly bad, and I think we have spoken about this multiple times on Daybreak. And that is because of the high upfront costs and uncertainty about the tech, changing infrastructure, and unknown future costs. Which is why people who buy EVs today are technically ones who can actually afford it. They are somewhat tech savvy and they want to display it as a status symbol. All of this was true also back in the 2000s, if you remember, when only a few people had mobile phones. Specifically for India, JSW's bold bet needs to be seen in that context. Around the same time it was launched, the Indian government announced the new electric subsidy policy titled PM Electric Drive Revolution in Innovative Vehicle Enhancement or PM E-Drive scheme. This has an outlay of 10,900 crore rupees over 2 years. The new policy offers incentives and subsidies for electric scooters, bikes, three wheelers, buses, and trucks. It is the continuation of the previous policy, FAME 2. But there is one pretty noticeable absence: electric cars. The thing is, this will most certainly slow down the adoption of electric cars. In fact, it already has. In the period after FAME 2 subsidy came to an end, electric car sales in India have dropped by nearly 10%. Simply put, if we want electric cars to go through mass adoption in India, subsidies from the government are not going to be the way to do it any longer. In his newsletter, Praveen said that it is likely that the Indian government is secretly hoping that its move will encourage companies like JSW to go the Reliance route. If manufacturers of EVs need consumers to adopt them, they will simply need to try harder and be more innovative with pricing, financing, marketing, and everything else. This places the risk and uncertainty in the hands of the companies themselves. And not all companies have the kind of capital, appetite, or the willingness to blow thousands of crores to create adoption with consumers. But there is a flip side to all of this. When Reliance stepped up in 2002 with mobile phones, it came in as a disruptive, powerful force that transformed mobile telephony forever in India. It spent a massive amount of money to do this. However, it did not reap the benefits. There are many reasons why Reliance could not capitalize on what it created. It bet on the wrong technology, and CDMA was a worse option than GSM. It had problems with service quality, plus, there was an internal battle between Mukesh and Anil Ambani, which did not help. Praveen says that perhaps JSW is in a similar place, although the scale of its ambition is a lot smaller. It's testing out its new electric car scheme for just one model instead of betting the house on it. Just like Reliance, it is also a powerful company with deep pockets and it can afford to persist at losing money to grow the market if it wants to. This time around, its bet seems to be paying off. The car maker managed to sell well over 10,000 units within 3 months of its launch. In fact, it has already hiked up the price of the car by 50,000 rupees across variants. But what does that mean for the rest of the industry? Well, in all likelihood, it could compel other companies to change the way they work, to take risks, to do more strange new things to get people to buy, adopt, and switch to EVs. Maybe this is how the revolution begins.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of The Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings. A full subscription unlocks daily long-form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. To subscribe, head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on top of the Ken website. Today's episode was hosted by Snigdha Sharma and edited by Rajiv CN.